good meat here. I guess we'll turn it on. We'll bypass that. But anyway, I'm going to, first of all, say Namaste. Everybody familiar with that? Namaste?
Namaste.
Yeah? No? What language is that from?
Oh,
Sanskrit?
God. Yes,
Sanskrit.
Thank you.
Sanskrit basically says this: the divine or the divinity in me recognizes and honors the divinity in you. That's a greeting. Namaste. I thought it's a beautiful greeting because what it does do is it sets the tone. And if in fact we all got in the habit of greeting each other this way, Namaste, it conjures up, like everything, you know, you associate one thing with something else, this with that, this with that. And if you got in the habit of seeing Namaste, and then the moment you see somebody, even if you don't greet them with Namaste, put the thought in your mind, oh, the divinity in me is greeting and meeting the divinity in someone else. Wow, now we're going to have a different encounter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if that person has a gun to my head. You know, wow, he got a gun to my head. He doesn't know that his divine essence is meeting another divine essence. But it doesn't change the fact that the divine in me is having a divine experience. You know, it doesn't feel like it. You know. But it's true. The moment you embrace that for your experience, you're going to remain outside of the usual judgmental mind. Because, forgive them, they know not what they do. Okay, when you remember that you're greeting a divine creation by God, of God. Doesn't matter they're awake or asleep. You can't judge them in that moment, or at least you wouldn't really be able to until you go back into your human intellect. My human intellect would be very, very good at judging that situation or that person. We're all pretty good at that. You know, someone walks through the door and I see they haven't had a bath in a week, you know, and they're wearing clothes that have holes in them. You know, an image comes to mind, you know, the judgment would usually pop up. Somebody else drives up in a Lamborghini, you know, and, you know, gold all around. You know, we all do this. We tend to put people in boxes and categorize things, and it's just a human condition. It is what we are as humans. It's not what we are as spirit. Namaste would definitely help us stay out of that. So it's a great thing. Thank you, by the way.
You're welcome.
This was
Thought of you when I saw it.
well, thank you. I'm going to go and just kind of reread just one little thing before we jump a little further, because we left off back in '07. Last year when we met, we were talking about, let's see, I think we left off right here, Corinthians. For by man came death, by a man has come also the resurrection from the dead. And in a little bit we're going to get into the meaning of life and death as soon as we get to the moment of choice. I'm not going to jump into it because I don't want to get lost until we get down there this time. Why do you suppose they did not say death came from God? See, in the Bible when it says by man came death, it didn't say by God. God didn't make death. Moreover, how do you resurrect from something if that something is final? See, if we were to define death, how would you define death?
How would I define death? Well, I've had a lot of education in this
Oh,
area,
okay.
so
Well,
it's gonna be
maybe we'll
different.
skip here. We'll move right to Mickey. Mickey, how would you define death?
Huh?
I mean, it'll be different than if you asked me, say, 4 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. How would you define death, Mickey?
You talking about the death experience? You're not.
No, I'm just saying, how do you define death?
Well, there's two different deaths.
Okay.
There's the shedding of the vehicle you're traveling in, that death, which is a physical death, and but there's also a spiritual death, which is judging, living dualistically.
Separation from God.
Right.
Separation from God.
Yeah.
Entertaining your ego.
Entertaining the ego. Sound logical, Gary?
I don't know if there is any such thing as a spiritual death. Since we're spirits, we live on eternally. So that's what I'm trying to reconcile
Okay.
in my head. Can there be a spiritual death?
No, we're talking about when we act ugly.
Okay, so you're saying no such thing as death. No such thing.
That was a tricky question.
Trick question. Yeah. No such thing as death. But would you agree that the majority of the world believes in death?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so let's call it an illusion. It's not really real, but it can be experienced. It's an illusion. Almost like a mirage in the desert. It's there, look at it, I see it. But when you get there, I wouldn't want to drink the water, right? Course in Miracles, bless you.
Bless you.
Course in Miracles says it's an illusion and it's not real. How about this? It's an illusion in the dream state. Could that be? It's an illusion in the dream state. This is how we resurrect. How do you come out of it? Remember when they asked Buddha, are you a god, you an angel, you a saint? After his enlightenment, how did he respond?
I'm awake.
I am awake. I'm awake. I'm no longer buying into the illusions relative to the human ego. The ego. The ego can die. The spirit can't. The spirit's infinite. And that's probably why Paul said, I die on a daily basis. I die? Well, wait a minute. If he died over and over again, then he had to be coming back to life. And he's going through... So he's basically having human, spiritual, or ego thought, spiritual thought. Ego thought, spiritual thought. Back and forth, back and forth. How else could you die over and over again? You'd only die once. But what Mickey said was also true when you talk about the body dying. The Bible talks about the second death. I don't know if anybody never read the Bible, but the Bible talks about the second death. And the Bible says this. I'm going to paraphrase, I don't remember the exact quote, but it's basically saying this. Anyone who moves into the Christ consciousness will not be hurt by the second death. And being hurt by the second death meaning the body. When you lose the body. When you lose the body, you're not going to be hurt. Why? Because you're not really experiencing a death to begin with. And the body you're dropping off. But if you're awake, then when you leave the body, you're still awake. That's why you can't be hurt by the second death.
I believe that to be true too. I mean, we know a psychic medium who's extremely spiritual, who just passed away. And they were saying how peaceful her death was and how pain-free her death was. And I read that, or I'm listening to that, this Disappearance of the Universe, in which has the approval of the Course in Miracles to even do this. And that's what they talk about in there. You don't experience the pain of dying if you're awake.
How could you? If you're awake, it doesn't matter whether you're in a body, out of body, where you are within creation. You know, in terms of the now, let's go back to that now. In terms of the now always is, as a spiritual being. You are wherever you put your attention. What's interesting is that in human form, we tend to forget that we are interconnected to the whole. This is what Megan was talking about, the separation from God. God being the whole, we're a part of that. Where is the separation? There really isn't any.
Well, when we act on God,
When we go into our ego, human thinking, judgmental minds, we experience separation. But that's an illusion in itself. That's why I said in my book, I said, separation is not a reality in terms of ultimate reality. It's a real experience, just like dreams. Anybody ever get afraid in your dream and you wake up and you're in a panic? You know? Well, in that moment, right in that moment, that was real. You know? And you break out into a sweat. It's like, oh. So that's a real experience. But it's not a real in terms of ultimate reality. There's something greater. There's much, much greater things that can be experienced. And that's what we all as spiritual beings have come into this world to discover. We've just come into this world to discover that we are more than this. We're more than the human self. We're more than the body. That's what the crucifixion was really about, and we'll get into that later. What Jesus really was representing when Jesus was allowing himself to be supposedly crucified to die for everyone's sins. He really was showing, I'm not a body and you can't touch me. Yes, you can kill the body, you can take the body, but you cannot kill me. You can't kill my essence. And in that regard, that's how he really was a savior. He really was a savior by showing people that they are much more than they believe they are. Because in the moment we open our minds to something greater, we open the door to the experience. Keep your focus on a very, very small tunnel. I was talking to somebody today about, you know, that expression, you can't see the forest for the trees. You know, I remember somebody one time saying, I can stand so close to you that you'll never even see me. And, you know, right here, if you're right here and you're seeing one tree, well, I sure can't see the forest. You know, it's like, wow, look at it. Well, there's an interesting tree here. You know, but step back, and then step back, and step back, and step back. And this is what detachment is about. You detach yourself from the meaning of the things that we are holding. We think that something is something because we're so absorbed in it. You know, isn't it easier usually to look at somebody else's life and give them advice
Oh, hell yeah.
than our own?
Yeah.
You know, why do you suppose that is? Why do you suppose it's so much easier to look at somebody else's life and tell them all the things that are wrong with their life when we can't handle our own? Usually, you know, we got our problems. We get so absorbed in our stuff that we can't find our way out. But look at somebody else. We're pretty good at telling them, you know, here's what you need to do. I've been there, done that. So easy. That thing, you can't see the forest for the tree deal. We get too close to our own perceptions and the meaning and the values we've given things that sometimes we're blinded by that. That's all we see. That overshadows everything. Anyway, let's get back over here where we're going, because I want to get to this moment of choice. This is something that is really going to give us that proper foundation.
So close.
We're so close. As with everything you can and will experience, death is based upon a belief. As long as you hold to the idea of something, you are setting the energy into motion to bring about the experience associated with that belief. That's exactly what I was just talking about here. When we see something and we've judged it, we give it a value, in that moment, remember what we've talked about in here about the law of attraction for one, and energies and how you set them in motion. Let's just here's a thought. Thought. Belief. Here's my belief right here. Isn't it cute? Now, that thought and that belief is going to set energy in motion. Right? Has to. It's the way it works. For me, for all of us. This is going to attract, because this is operating at a frequency. That thought. Every thought you have, it's frequency. Over here, we're going to talk about love, fear. Two different frequencies. Do you ever feel fear?
Mm-hmm.
Animals can smell it. Right? They claim, if an animal senses fear, they may attack, right? We all vibrate. Everything vibrates at frequencies. Every thought you have carries a frequency. You ever walk into a room and you can feel the tension? Not a word is spoken, but you just feel, holy shit, what am I doing in here? Yeah, yeah. Well, it's all frequency. And then you walk in, oh, doesn't this feel so pleasant? Isn't this great? Well, this is one of the things that I see about church. Church, for example. Well, the thought, the belief of what they're there for, many times will create a vibration, and people feel it. And they feel comfortable with each other. So sometimes they go just for that. I love being there. I love the feeling. Anyway, I don't want to get too far into that. I just wanted to touch on the fact that our thoughts and beliefs have a frequency, and they're going to create something. And they're going to send that energy off, and it's going to come back in terms of an experience. It has to. Anything that you experience in time is triggered by a thought. So this process is happening. We may not see it happening because it happens so fast. You ever hear of a nanosecond? Pretty quick. I don't remember exactly what I remember nanotechnology. I remember seeing somebody from MIT at one time talking about nanotechnology. And the way it was explained by this professor at MIT, he said they could create a machine based on a molecular level, which was 1/1,000,000,000th of an inch. That's pretty damn small. I can't go 1/1,000,000,000th of an inch. Pretty damn small. He said this had to be alien technology they were talking about. This was like 30 years ago. He said this: they could create a machine that would self-replicate at that level. So, wow, pretty sophisticated stuff for 30 years ago. My guess is they had some alien technology and they're trying to back out of it, because he also said they knew that they could create this. You ever see Star Trek where they go and they, comes right out of air, a meal just appears. That's what he was talking about. On that level, out of the molecules they were just going to create. He said they could create, like for example, they set up a machine to reproduce these glasses, and it would just keep coming and coming and coming, seemingly out of nowhere, because it was coming from the molecular level. He said the problem would be that they didn't understand how to stop it once they started it. Okay? That's why I said this was alien technology that they got a hold of, and they didn't understand it. Okay? But anyway, I want to get back to this. I was just talking about time here and how our thoughts, because we're always talking about the now, and this is very difficult for us to wrap our minds around. It really, really is. The fact that the now always is, where the past, the present, and the future are always available now. Now, that being said, linear time is on a track. And in terms of linear time, we all know that one moment is connected to the next moment, and there's a sequence to everything happening in terms of linear time. Our thoughts are changing constantly. Our beliefs may not change as readily as our thoughts, but we can change our beliefs by changing the thought. If you don't change the belief, then the frequency is going to remain the same. Right? So we all know that, what was it Newton's law? Newton's law that said once you set something in motion, it will stay in motion until, how's it go? Till it comes up against an object? I mean, I'm not a physicist. I remember reading something years ago and where it talked about that. Once something's set in motion, it's going to keep in motion until it hits something. Same thing. See, as human beings, we are in charge of our thoughts. Most people don't know that. Most people don't recognize the power we have within us. But we do have a job, our thoughts. We're all only, I'm not responsible for any of your thoughts, I'm only responsible for mine, okay? And vice versa. And we're going to get into why I say this here, because we're almost at that point. We're getting real close. Judgment based on perceptions will not always be true. Now, why do I say that? Judgments based on perceptions may not always be true. Remember when we first started our discussion about death? It's an illusion. It's a real experience until you awaken. What happens after you awaken? It changes. The whole meaning, everything that you thought changes. There's only one thing that doesn't change. See, this is one thing that the Course talks about all the time, fear. Fear is based on illusions, it's not real. Fears are changing constantly. What do they say about fears? How do you address a fear? You got a fear, how do you get rid of it?
By meet it head on.
Meeting it head on?
Mm-hmm.
Then what happens?
You're supposed to conquer it.
You're supposed to conquer it, okay, yeah. Many times we conquer our fears by dealing with the fear. What happens after you deal with the fear?
You come up with a new
Your
fear.
belief has changed.
Your belief has changed.
Oh.
You're not afraid anymore. It went away. Right? Fears change. What doesn't change? Love. God. Okay? God will never change. How does God stay in a state that is impossible to change?
How does he?
Yeah.
Because that's what he is.
Okay?
Or what is love?
Okay. In a little bit, we're going to get to the reason why we moved from here to here. Here we are. We're getting there.
Those are lessons that I did not.
All perceptions are relative. They can and do change perceptions. All right? This is Einstein's little thing about perception. Put your hand on a hot stove for a minute, and it seems like an hour. Sit with a pretty girl for an hour, and it seems like a minute.
A second.
That's relativity, right? Well, of course, talking about men here, and we won't get into that.
That's relative too.
But anyway, no, we're not going to go for that. But anyway, you get the idea that the meaning that we give to something. You know, many people say, "Oh, remember when you were a kid and summer vacation's coming, and summer vacation comes and it's all over, and where did that go? It's gone, poof." Now all year you wait for it, and then poof, it's gone. Now, time does that, or our perception of time does that. Time is not really being altered to that degree, but our perception of it is being altered. If for example, someone came in here, I hate using this one, but it just came to me. So I'm going to use it. Let's just say that some terrorist came in here and started pulling off our fingernails one at a time. Okay, now, as bad as that is, it's a sick thought, isn't it? Imagine how time would be distorted.
Yeah.
And how long that experience would seem like it was being dragged out. Okay?
Ask a pregnant woman in her 9th month.
There you go.
There you
All right,
go.
for an example.
That's good.
But that's a good one. That's probably much enough. But anyway, we get the idea. The idea is that things change relative to the meaning we give them. That's what perceptions are all about. Getting back to the Garden of Eden, here we go. We're really getting here now. The Garden of Eden. Here is a metaphor for the essential choice that we face in every moment. On one hand, we have the tree of life. Tree of life. And on page 27, we got a picture. There's the tree of life. There it is. Metaphor. Tree of life. Okay. And on the other hand, we have the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Let's see. We don't need any of this except for, I'm going to leave over there love and fear. We're going to take all the other stuff off just for now. And we're going to talk about the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And this is essential that we remember that this is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It doesn't say the tree of evil. Right? It doesn't say the tree of evil. It says the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's vital. Vitally important that we see that good and evil side of things. The other is life. There's our two metaphors. That's it. A or B. We're not talking about C. We're not throwing a C in it. We're saying A or B. Okay. Tree of knowledge of good and evil. Separation and death. What we talked about at the very beginning. What is death? Separation from God in terms of what we perceive to be. Not really separate. Who's going to separate themselves? Nobody. If God is the summation of all it is, I can't jump outside of that. I have yet to meet the person that can jump outside of all that is. When you meet that person, you bring them here. I'd love to meet them. Haven't met the person. Another way to look at this is to say that we are always offered the choice either to live in oneness, which is love. Remember, love doesn't change. Or to experience separation, which is fear and death. The fear. Okay. One look at the world will suffice to show very clearly that very few people here recognize the fundamental truth that every single person is an expression of God and worthy of unconditional love. Remember our Namaste. If I recognize every single person on the face of the planet is an expression from God, whether they're awake or asleep, regardless as to what they believe, I recognize the divine in them. My job is to stay out of judgment, is not judge them and be loving. That's my job. Somebody else's job is to torment and pull the finger. No one has that job to do. But when we get into the ego minds, we got some very twisted thoughts. Let me tell you, I've had a couple. we do have twisted minds here. All of us as human beings, we can be very sadistic creatures. I went one time when I was in Europe. I think it was in Amsterdam. There was a exhibition, and it was called Medieval Tortures.
Oh, gee.
Oh my God! Oh, the brutality, the sadistic minds we have as human, what we can do to one another. You know, somebody will just sit and yeah, we'll get those thoughts out of our head. I just wanted to just share how barbaric and sick our minds can be as human. Now, as loving creatures of God, they're the exact opposite of that. Okay? No one could ever think to hurt another when we remember that's divine. That's a divine creation of God. So anyway, we've already covered a lot of ground, which we have, beginning with the story of creation. Next came man, and then the choice. We have the choice. And I'm going to put right on here, A or B. And I'm going to put over here love and fear. Would you agree we all have the choice to love?
Free will.
Free will. In every given moment, I don't care what the situation, I don't care what comes down the road, you have the ability to choose to love. No matter what comes. We've talked in here about the Amish, how they responded, and how they showed love. Now, to 90% of the population, somebody wants vengeance. Somebody's got to pay. That's not love. That's based on seeing good and evil and buying into our fears. No, the world is full of terrorists. We better go out there and kill them before they get to us. Well, you know what? That belongs on this side of the equation. It's not loving to go kill anybody for any reason. I mean, I don't care what anyone says. You cannot kill in the name of God. You can't have a holy war. Can't be done. Jihad. Well, actually, no. Now,
Or
let
the
me say this.
Crusades.
Let me say, now I didn't understand what jihad meant. I watched a special one night when they were talking about what jihad really meant. And I talked to a Muslim, he was a professor, and he talked about what jihad was all about. And you know what jihad means? To a Muslim, I mean to a very, very,
Just a war in the name of their religion.
very devout Muslim. The true meaning of jihad refers to the struggle that goes on within that individual. That's what the jihad was supposed to be about. Now that doesn't mean that somebody hasn't
Without
taken the
their war
meaning and
tune.
reinterpreted it and misrepresented it, such as what we've done many times in terms of Christianity. We've taken things and fed them out to people and said, oh, this means this, that means that. But what it really meant was the struggle that goes on within the individual between these two states.
Is jihad.
That's the jihad. Yeah, that's what that individual was explaining to me, the professor, and I said, well, that's very different than what I was told it meant. See, this is the problem when we buy into what somebody, this means that, that means that. You know what? I like what
Especially
Buddha
if it's
says.
from a different language.
I like what Buddha says. Look, listen to people, but then go within yourself and find your truth inside.
Yeah.
don't take somebody else's interpretation. I say this many times to everybody that I speak to. Don't believe what I tell you just because I say it. If this makes sense, if it feels right, accept it. If it doesn't, hey, you're going to live however you want to live anyway, live it. But I say this, if it makes sense, now you've found your truth. Each of us has to find our own truth, you know? It's up to us. But I'll tell you what, this is what the Bible is saying. This is what this is saying. This is what Buddha was teaching. Buddha was teaching us to withdraw our attachment to the meanings we've given to things. Right? The Bhagavad Gita is teaching the exact same thing. It says the highest objective for any man to live is to serve God. Surrender your ego. I'm going to put over here, this is our ego. Surrender your ego attachments and live for God. Anyway, we're going to get back to this before we get too far off track. We've already covered a lot of ground, beginning with the story of creation itself. Next came man. Then came the choice of love or fear as an experience. By the way, isn't it interesting that according to the story, remember we all know the story of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve chose the tree of judgment, where duality is at the center. Remember the story, Adam and Eve, if you eat of this tree, you're going to die. And according to the story, first, hate to say this one, so all the women out here, but Eve was the guilt.
Amen, brother.
It's always mama's fault.
And what happened? The men just blindly followed.
Well, yeah, but you know, they were, no, we won't go there. But anyway, according to our story, Adam and Eve ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So basically what they did was they chose this over
They
this.
learned judgment instead
Right.
of just all that it was.
When you talk about the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that title seems like a good thing. Seems like that's what everybody is trying to figure out if they're searching for wisdom and knowledge. It's like we want knowledge, we want to understand the difference between good and evil. But when you go beyond that, you realize, well, to do that is judgment. So
Yes.
maybe it should have been the choice between life and judgment. It would seem a lot simpler. Because when you label it the knowledge of good and evil, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it seems like, well, that's a noble
Yes, what do you
goal
think?
to
Exactly,
achieve.
that's what the
Why
whole
wouldn't you
point
want
was.
that? But
Trust.
when you go deeper into it, then you see, well, it really means judgment, and that makes some people good, some people bad, and you have to judge, and that's what we should be avoiding. So,
The Bhagavad Gita, this talks about, and we've talked about this, the states that we go through, as in terms of the human experience. Now I'm gonna put also here, human experience. Okay, the human experience. I'm gonna put also here, on this side, we're gonna put evil. And this side we're going to put good. Okay? Good and evil. There it is. That's the human experience. Well, somewhere I get into it down the road here, but I'm going to jump ahead, like I do often. First family. Let's talk about the first family. We had Adam and Eve. They ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. According to our story, they died. They had the death experience because according to the story, they died the very day. They died. Then, within the death experience, Eve gave birth. Right? Adam and Eve come out. Here we have Cain and Abel. They spring out onto the scene. So, within the death experience, we have children. Wow! Look at this. Here comes the child. Right into death.
so you're equating kids to the death experience? It's,
The death of the experience.
some say it feels like that.
So, yeah, right?
So that's the death of romance.
No, death of romance, there you go. But anyway, if we look at this, Adam and Eve, they had children after they died, unless our story is not to be accepted in any way. Let's say we want to accept our story. And let's say we want to accept the story in the way in which it's played out. So let's read the story the way it's played out. The way it's played out is, God says to Adam and Eve, look, I'm going to take all this off for now because it's kind of confusing the way it's written on here. I need a bigger board. But anyway, over here we have life. Here we have death. Here we have awake. And here we have asleep. Because all these things were mentioned in the Bible, right? Just like this. And here we have ego.
In life?
And here we have spirit.
No.
No,
Oh, wait a minute.
backwards.
See? You're good, you're paying attention over there.
Yeah.
Good job, Jim.
Spirit, good job, good job. All right. Normally I write them on the other side. Okay. So here we have these two different states that we can experience. Now, when we talked about separation, separation, as Megan said, we're separated from God, but not truly, because, wait a minute, God's everything. Can we ever separate ourselves? We can't. But can we experience?
And we can believe that we're separate.
Can you experience separation in your mind?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah,
Your mindset, that's what I meant, your mindset's separate from God.
your mind, the human mind, the human psyche. Anybody ever feel alone at any time in their life?
Yeah.
Knowing God is the summation of all that exists, have you ever been alone at any time in your life?
No.
Not one person. But we can feel it. The mind is very creative. The mind can make us believe things. So we experience separation. And I'm going to put up here love and fear.
I was just telling Gary, everybody knows footprints in the sand, right?
Yep.
Footprints in the sand, yes. Yeah,
My God, why did you forsake me? No, but it's when I carried you.
absolutely. You know, we are never ever separate from God in any way, but we can believe in it. And remember what we've talked in here about beliefs.
Nothing is stronger than a belief in a belief.
Nothing stronger than a belief in a belief, and that belief is sending off energy and is going to bring you an experience
Relative to that belief.
relative to your belief, not to Gary's belief.
Right.
Gary can believe whatever he wants. That can't change and alter who I am, unless I say, hey, I like what he believes. How do you do it? And I start changing my belief. So we can help each other alter our beliefs, but no one can make anybody see something they don't. You know that saying, there's none so blind as those who refuse to see. If we hang on to an erroneous belief as our belief system, we're stuck in it. Nobody can move us from that. That's why we all have our own job to do. And then here, in the little box, duality, a system based on opposites, positive and negative, good and bad, awake and asleep, life and death, etc. That's duality, right? We're all familiar with that. We all have pretty good judgmental minds. I would wager to bet we're all pretty good judges in here. We didn't get to see firsthand the introduction of cause and effect, explaining how it is possible, explaining how it could be said that by man came death. See, this is how it says by man came death. Death, we said, and I think we pretty much agreed at this point, death is the belief in separation from God. which is going to bring us in an experience that is uniquely ours, that we will have until we change our belief. The moment we change our belief, we now change our experience. You feel alone in the world until you recognize, wait a minute, God's the summation of everything. There's no separation. I'm no longer separate from God. I now change my experience. It has to follow. Because all experience follows thought. Right? I can't have an experience that is not part of my makeup, that's originating from me. Right? Who in here is capable of having an experience that didn't originate with them? This is the beauty. The beauty of knowing this is that no one can control you. Who can control you? Nobody. They can influence you. We can all be influenced. We can all be, oh, I like that. Let's go there. Let's do this. Let's do that. We can all follow. Remember Christ talking about the sheep? You ever read about the sheep? They're so stupid that they'll just fall off the cliff. One goes, they keep following. Whoa, we all keep going. Well, we all as human beings have the ability to follow or to take a step back and say, wait a minute. Now let me take a look at this for myself. And ultimately, that's what we all should be doing. We all should be thinking for ourselves and living more awakened. That's the choice we have. We can live asleep or we can live awake. We can be living in love or we can be coming from fear. Every moment. Anyway, we'll get deeper into that as we go along. In reality, the term death is synonymous with the experience of separation, which in turn is triggered by choice. So, in fact, Adam and Eve are not responsible. How many have heard, when I was a kid, I remember hearing, well, we got thrown out of paradise because Adam and Eve ate the apple. You ever hear that story? Wait a minute. If now always is, where the past, the present, and the future are now, Adam and Eve have no control over any of us.
They're their own separate entity.
They're their own separate entity.
They're doing their thing.
Exactly. You want to be following them? You want to be following their example, which most of the world does. We see things as human beings. We see them in dualistic terms. We're all good at categorizing everything. And so we are emulating Adam and Eve. They didn't do this to us. No one did this to you. You did this to you. The moment you recognize you did this, the moment you can undo this. That's empowerment. This is what they don't really teach us. They don't really teach us how powerful we are. This is what Christ really came here to teach us, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. Christ came here to show us how to regain our ability to live on this side of the equation, to live the awakened state, to love rather than to fear, to get outside of all of the linear track that we're stuck in.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Anyway, like I say, this either fits or it doesn't fit. If it does,
You did, we've been here.
grab on. If it doesn't, hey.
Yeah, but we're.
Yes, you read that correctly. I am saying it is up to you and you alone to experience something that is not real, based on illusion and fear, or to experience the reality in love. Separation's not real. Our judgments about people they're not really real in terms of ultimate reality, although in that moment, and later we're going to talk about how in this realm, creation was created in such a way to validate even our erroneous beliefs. The Bible says God will give them strong delusions to believe their own lies. That's what it says. Is it true? Of course it's true. Yeah, I judge somebody, and then all of a sudden, a week later, something happens to show me, see, I'm right again. Damn, am I good. I'm always right when I judge people. You know, I'm almost always on time. I knew I couldn't trust that son of a bitch.
That's right.
You know, I could tell just the second I looked at them. You know, I'm always right. You know, it's the way the creation is. The Course in Miracles says, what you perceive, you project. Okay? What you project is going to come back to you, and then you're going to perceive it. You see the vicious cycle? And so what happens is our beliefs get validated even though they're erroneous. You wonder why it's so hard to break out of this? You wonder how it's so hard to move back into love and to break free of the world? This is not an easy job. Anyone who tells you this is easy, I say, you know what? They've never experienced what it means. Because this is a full-time job. Every single day, every single moment, you must be consciously vigilant to stay out of the human mind and stop judging. I mean, anyway, that's the way I find it. I mean, if I'm wrong and somebody else has found an easier way, bring it on, because I haven't found it yet.
As far as living day-to-day, moment-to-moment, those choices between the judgment of good and evil and the tree of life, which is love, I'm not sure how to live that way, or it seems complicated, but to break it down on that side, the opposite of judgment is acceptance. And so it seems to me that the simplest thing for me is to be accepting of all people, all situations, and that seems easier to achieve than unconditional love or being godlike, because I don't know quite what that means, but I can understand acceptance.
Unconditional love would be exactly what you just said. Acceptance. What is God not going to accept?
Accept the events, accept people, accept their situation, accept them as they are, don't judge them. And so, to me, that puts, at least in my mind, puts it in easier terms that I might be able to
handle.
Attempt to achieve.
Okay, let's talk about that for a minute. First of all, let's talk about the difference between life and death and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which I'm going to call the death experience. The death experience, how is this triggered? How do we trigger this?
By judging.
Judging. Well, I guess I don't need to eat.
It's okay.
We judge in that moment, and I think every one of us in this room has judged at least once. Probably in the last, I don't know exactly how often we do, but we're all pretty familiar with judging. If we judge, we will have the death experience for as long as we hang on to that judgment. Right? You judge an individual. Let's take our children. We all have children here, right? We all know what it is to look at our children. You judge your child in any way. You get pissed off at the child. I've had this moment. I can relate to it. I think we've all probably had this moment. We're pissed off at our child for something that we feel they've done, and we're feeling this blood boiling inside. And we feel the anger. When does that end? When does the anger end? When does that feeling go away?
Well, it's different, I guess, depending on the situation. Sometimes it's when they apologize, sometimes it's when they correct their action, sometimes it's when we just decide to do the quote of some battles just aren't worth fighting and giving up on it.
It's
So it all depends.
whenever we let go,
Whenever we let go. When we let go. When we let go. It stops for us.
Regardless of what they do.
Exactly. We are all individualized. We are all responsible for us. We're not responsible for another, even though we've been taught. We are responsible for our children. You're legally responsible till they get a certain age. Well, we are responsible, that's true. But what are we responsible to teach them, to share with them? To me, I would rather teach this. Love and life, rather than fear and death. That's what I would rather teach my children. Now, in order for me to teach them, I got a big job. Okay? I then have to live it to teach it. Because whatever I am living is what I'm teaching. We do a pretty good job at teaching our children how to become just like us. Remember, there's that song, I can't remember now. Grew Up Just Like Me.
Cat in the Cradle?
I'm sorry?
Cat in the Cradle?
Cat in the Cradle. Yeah. We're all familiar with that song. Now, isn't that pretty much true? Our children grow up and become us. We have become, not necessarily exactly like us, but pretty much we have indoctrinated our children to think like us. And this is what goes on. We do this. We teach them to fear rather than to love. We teach them to judge just like us. We teach them, you got to be careful out there. This is the way the world is. It's this, it's this, it's this. We want to share, and this is our way of sharing love in our minds, is to teach them to become just like us. Right? We're not really teaching them to be spiritually awakened because we're not living spiritually awakened. Now I say, forgive yourselves because you didn't know what you're doing. Okay? We all fit into that same category. We have done our best in that moment. When you know more, then you will be more. If you don't know, then you're doing your best.
Are there very many people who reach that level of enlightenment when they're, 20 years old or 25, and when you're teaching your kids, it's like you haven't learned life yourself yet. And at least I haven't met very many teenagers and 20-year-olds
And to be honest, even if, at this age, I always had a child, and I'm so much more educated on this. You still are living in the human form, and you still have to make sure they don't just run out in front of a car. So you're still going to put a certain amount of fear-based thinking in them.
Do you?
I'm sure I would.
Well, let me say this. Relative to your belief system, that statement you just made was true. Relative to your belief system. Change your belief system and understand this. There is always a perfection in every given moment, and there are no accidents in creation. Now, if there's no accidents in creation, what do you have to teach your child? Do you have to be fearful for your child any longer if there's no accidents?
I follow what you're saying.
I know, but I'm not saying
Nothing's
that.
stronger than a belief in a belief.
Nothing's stronger than a belief in a belief.
When I look at that love and fear fear and death and love and life, I just keep hearing in my mind that movie, The
Matrix.
Peaceful Warrior, where the kid or the guy is saying something to him. I forget exactly what they're talking about. And so the kid turns to him and says, "What are you, out of your mind?" He goes, "No, but that's where we want you to go."
Yeah.
So basically, the fear and death can be summed up as living in the human mind, and love and life is you got to go out of your mind to
Out of your mind.
experience that.
Yeah, absolutely. You do have to go literally out of your human mind. Now, this requires a lot of trust and a lot of faith. But I got to say this. You don't have to adopt it overnight. You can work it in increments. And it takes practice like anything. And in the meditative state, you are opening the channel, you're opening the line of communication for Spirit to speak to you. If we all understood that we literally are living and breathing and having our being in the body of God, don't you think we could trust a little bit more that God is going to handle the details? You know, if we could let go of our perceptions, and I'm not saying that I don't have any moments where my perceptions get in the way of my being. They do. So Neil will probably tell you that there are times when my beliefs that I can't let go of cloud my being. But I do know what we're talking about here. I know this is truth. This is ultimate reality. It's doable. It's not easy. It's a full-time job. And to answer your question, Gary, very few people in this world are living this at any age, never mind in their 20s. You know, we're not in a dimension of enlightened beings. Look around. You know, do you think that these are the examples you want to follow? I don't think so. I'm saying you look at the world leaders, you look at the spiritual teachers, who do you see that you would want to follow? Which one of them do you see, say, wow, that's what I want to be? You know,
I haven't seen any.
Exactly. Don't look to them. Look to you. Look to God. This is between you and God, me and God. And God can be trusted. Don't trust somebody, don't trust some teaching. Trust the teaching can help you find your way to God. But then, open your line of communication. Because everyone is equal in that regard. No one has a monopoly on communicating with God. Nobody. Bar none. Everyone is just as equipped to open that line of communication. Most don't avail themselves of it because we don't believe it. Our beliefs get in the way. Our beliefs, we believe in death. We believe in separation. We believe we're human beings.